Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. It is great to have you with us on this Tuesday. Dave Revson, Dave Wanstead. We're 2 days away.
I can't believe it.
From Big Ten football.
I know. It's awesome. The schedules, with a Thursday game, for the coaches trying to match up their schedules when everybody's thinking Thursday, you're thinking Saturday. You know what I mean? So it's
right.
It's a good time of year. And I'll tell you what, by playing on a Thursday, it gives you a little cushion to reevaluate, because the biggest margin of improvement traditionally is from the first game to the second game.
Yep.
So with having a few extra days and playing on a Thursday, this time of year, it's not a problem. In the season, some people don't like it, but to start the season, I guarantee you, PJ and them are ready to go.
Well, I know fans like it. You get 4 days straight of games, and people are fired up about that. We ran you through the East yesterday. Today we're going to run through the Big Ten West. That is our big story. As you probably recall, it was Purdue that won it last year, edging out Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota in a race that came down to the final weekend. Amazingly, more than half of this division has new coaches, including the Boilermakers. All 4 coaching changes in the Big Ten are in the West, the most new coaches in the conference in one season since 2016. Let's run through the West Division, and we'll start with one of those new coaches in Luke Fickell, Wisconsin, making the change obviously at midseason last year with Paul Chryst, and then Fickell coming over from Cincinnati at the end of the season. One of the things that I know is really interesting is just this notion of Wisconsin going to the air raid offense with Phil Longo. So you've got a defensive-minded coach in Fickell who did a tremendous job at Cincinnati, including getting them to the college football playoff. You've got this new look offense that's unlike anything that we've seen in Madison. What intrigues you the most about the Badgers?
Well, I can tell fans right now, air raid offense is not coming to Wisconsin. When you got a defensive head coach like Luke Fickell, air raid's not going to be part of the equation, okay? And I think you got to go back and look at Phil Longo's history. Just go back to when he was at North Carolina. They led the ACC in rushing. They were a balanced attack, so he will throw it. He's done a fantastic job with quarterbacks, but they're balanced, and I think that's what, as compared to, going back to the Barry Alvarez days when Wisconsin was kind of one-dimensional, run the ball, play defense and special teams. This is going to give them an opportunity to score more points, and they're not going to have to win 10-7 games.
Well, I think one of the misconceptions, though, about the air raid, because Longo is off that tree, right? I mean, this is his background. But just because you run the air raid doesn't mean that you don't run the ball, right? He's had a number of 1,000-yard rushers at North Carolina. I mean, to me, the beauty of it for Braylon Allen is we're talking about a running back who faced 20 more 8-man boxes than any other back in the country last year and still managed to run for 1,200 yards. When you think about them with 4 wide and Braylon Allen now facing 7-man boxes, how much better could he be, like on a yards per carry basis, than he was a year ago?
Absolutely. When you see nothing puts more stress on a defense than to be lined up and say, are they running it or are they passing it? Because now everybody's got to be honest, Trevor, and you've got to keep those safeties back there to defend the pass, and at the same time, you got to be trying to stop the running game. So you're 100% right. With a new quarterback coming in, right, Tanner Mordecai from SMU. This guy's thrown 72. Scored 72 touchdowns. I mean, he's played a lot of football. He was coached by Sonny Dykes, who was one of the better offensive minds in football. So he's got a great background to him, and that's just having to know in the back of your mind, he could throw it. We got Brilliant who can run it. That makes them a lot more dangerous, in my opinion, than before.
And they'll play good defense. They always do at Wisconsin. Mike Tressell's been really complimentary of the defensive players that the prior staff had recruited. So a lot to like there. The media likes them. They were picked first in the Cleveland.com preseason poll this year.
They were. I don't know. I would have probably taken somebody else But that's for
let's dive into some of somebody else's.
The team right now I want to talk about is Iowa. But one last point about the defense that I think we got to keep our eyes on. You know, they were traditionally with Jim Leonard there in the past. They were a 3-4 defense, and now Tressel's kind of trying to incorporate this 3-3-5 defense. So I'm going to be real curious watching them this weekend to see exactly how they line up and how they're trying to attack from a defensive standpoint.
You mentioned Iowa. I want to get to them. We're talking about all the new coaches in the West. Kirk Ferentz is not one of them. This is his 25th year. He's the longest tenured coach in college football. But it does feel like a little bit of a different year for them, just because, frankly, of the pressure that's on the offense and these benchmarks that they've been given in terms of scoring for Brian Ferentz. And then the notion that Kirk Ferentz, who hasn't gone into the portal a ton, he has kind of dabbled in it through the years, but to go and get Cade McNamara, one of the best quarterbacks that was out there in the transfer portal. It seems like McNamara is healthy and ready to go. You seem to be implying you really like this Iowa team. Where do you think they fit in?
I like them because, they lost some playmakers on defense, Jack Campbell, okay? But I think our man Cooper DeJean can bring that type of leadership. And that's Jack Campbell was big-time playmaker, player of the year on defense. But I think that they'll have that leadership. I picked Iowa as potentially one of my top 5 best defensive lines in the conference this year. So they've got great depth on defense. So I think they'll get back to where they were there. But the focus has to be this offense, and can they come up with enough receivers to make plays? Yeah. Do they have the tight ends? Absolutely. They got Luke Lachey, and then they got the transfer, right? Chris All from Michigan, who came over with McNamara. So tight ends, these guys will be, I don't want to say more effective than Sam Laporta was last year. He was a great player. He's going to start now for the Detroit Lions. But their tight end position as a group, I think, will be stronger.
Right.
Now the question is, you got McNamara 13-3 as a starter. Think of that. I mean, that is fun, at playing at the highest level you can play at. So now you got McNamara. They're going to run the ball with Kurt. They're going to play good defense, right? The question is going to be, can they come up with enough speed, in my opinion, on the outside and playmakers at the receiver position to make those type of plays that they're going to have to make? Because I don't know how many points you can score a game throwing the ball to the tight end. Is that critical? Absolutely. Can you score points? Sure. But you need to be able to take the top off of defense. You know what I'm talking about.
Right. And truthfully, we did not see a ton of that when we were there at practice. But what I would say is that McNamara was hurt the day we were there, right? As everyone knows, he was banged up a little bit in camp. And so it did seem like a lot more of All and Lachey and dumping it down to those guys on obvious passing situations. But again, I know they feel like they've upgraded. Flipper Anderson's son came in as a wide receiver. They liked him a lot. They were really complimentary of him when we were there. So we'll see. The offensive line was clearly better. And again, you don't need to score a ton of points if you're Iowa. I mean, there were only 3 games last year that gave up more than 13 points. I mean, it's crazy to think of how good they are defensively.
And the special teams, too. I don't want to slight that.
Right.
They got both kickers back, right? They bring both kickers back. So, and I bring that up because Iowa, those
the best punter in the country.
Best punter in the country, and your field goal kicker has to, traditionally at Iowa, win those close games because you're going to be in a lot of them. So I think with McNamara, we just talked about the threat of you look at, we talked about Wisconsin, run the ball. Now if we can throw it, it loosens it up. Well, on the other hand, we know a little bit like Iowa. Iowa's going to try to run the ball. They always have. Now we got a legitimate quarterback, again, that can loosen up. It'll help that running game.
Let's focus in on Minnesota, and they had a great run game, of course, and have for years under P.J. Fleck. You lose Mo Ibrahim, the all-time leading rusher. You also lose your second all-time leading passer in Tanner Morgan, although certainly Ethan Kaliakmanis was eased into this role last year, played a fairly prominent role down the stretch. Tanner Morgan, as we know, was banged up for portions of the year. So Kaliakmanis, far from a brand new starter, but again, this is a much different role for him. You know they're going to be really good defensively with Joe Rossi. I can't say enough about the job P.J. Fleck has done. I know you've spent some time around this program. Give us your impressions of the Gophers and a team that maybe because of their schedule, people are counting out a little bit in the West. They got to play both Minnesota both Michigan and Ohio State, I should say. But this is a talented team.
Yeah, the schedule will be a challenge. There's no question about that. And replacing the stars of your offense, and Trey Potts, the backup running back, behind Mo. He's not there. So, the good news is, in my opinion, is the PJ Fleck has done a phenomenal job of creating the culture that he wants. His players are going to lay it on the line. That they're going to be prepared. When you can take those two things from a head coach's standpoint and say, we're going to play as hard as we've ever played, we're not going to make crazy mistakes, we're going to protect the football, all these little things, that gives you a chance to win a game when your star quarterback and your star running back are being replaced. So that the culture there will give him a chance. The running back position is the one more so than the quarterback. I really believe, because that is, they're talking about the transfer in. Sean was a Tyler. He's a six-year guy from Western Michigan. So be a 6-year playing. I don't know much about him. I don't think anybody does yet. So who comes out of the pack with running backs? I think in the tradition for Minnesota fans, you're going to see a little bit more of running back by committee this year, as in the past it was Mo and it was Mo. That was it, until he got hurt some. But this year, I think until they really find their niche at running back, that's going to be the big indecision. And you don't want to put your young quarterback in bad situations. And how does that happen? When you can't run the football. So I think this offensive line is, Brian Callahan, the line coach up there, is as good as anybody in the country. If they can get a solid running game, which traditionally they will, that is going to be the best thing that can happen to help this new quarterback situation.
And they've done a wonderful job defensively. I mean, give Joe Rossi a ton of credit. They give up their fewest points per game since 1967 last year. And I think it's one of those situations where, look, they lost some big-time performers off that defense, but I think we've gotten to the point where you trust them, that they're going to be good on that side of the ball. They also dipped into the portal there some. Again, Mariano Sori-Marin was a huge part of what they did.
Yeah, smart guy. Wow.
He's gone really impressive. But still, I feel like, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like we've gotten to the point, is it necessarily Iowa's defense where year in and year out, they're going to be top 20 in the country. They've done it 7 straight years. I don't know whether it's quite there yet, but these last couple years, what we've seen from Minnesota, they play great complementary football. They keep the defense off the field. But when they're on there, Joe Rossi's unit's as good as anyone.
Absolutely. Smart guys. I mean, I sat in his meetings a year ago and top 10 2 years in a row in scoring defense in the country. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident, Rever. You know what I mean? So to your point, absolutely. And in an opening game, we'll get to it down the road, when you're playing a team in Nebraska with a new head coach and a new quarterback and you're not sure, you want to have a defense right here that has a foundation. And that's what Joe Rossi has brought to the table along with the other coaches. And they'll be good again this year. How good, we don't know, but you don't have to worry about their defense being ready to play.
We'll get you the Gophers and Huskers, as you said, a little bit later in the show and preview that game. I do want to talk about Illinois here before we take a break. Brett Bielema's team was kind of in the driver's seat for a while last year in the West, and then it faded a little bit, a few disappointing performances. But, man, this is a talented group. It is a really well-coached group. I mean, you look at their front seven. I know he feels fabulous about that front seven on defense. Offensively, you're replacing the quarterback in Luke Altmaier. I just feel like for some reason, though, you just don't feel like people are, I don't want to say taking them seriously to contend, but there aren't a whole lot of people picking Illinois to win the division. I've got to tell you, Wani, after we went and saw all these teams, like Illinois is right in that hunt. Do they have a few question marks? They do. But they're incredibly well coached, and man, they've got some difference makers.
Yeah, a couple things that I think we need to be aware of. One, you talked about, Luke Altmaier, new quarterback coming in from Ole Miss. He's got plenty of ability. I don't know if he can be Tommy DeVito, my guy. I'm kidding, because I picked him as the MVP last year, and you didn't. He might with the New York Giants anyway. He's in Chase Brown, So you got big time guys here that you got to replace, but they're going to find a way to run the football. I mean, because that's what Brett does.
Yeah.
Defensively, you mentioned the defensive line. They graduate a lot of secondary guys. That secondary was probably arguably the best secondary in college football last year by production, but it all starts up front. And if you ask me, would you rather graduate your whole defensive line or graduate your secondary? Hey, I'll graduate the secondary every year. Huh. Those guys up front, run-wise, pass-wise, particularly in the physical conference of the Big Ten, that's where it starts. So Brent's got that going for him. And I'll tell you another thing that, Jim Leonard, right? I mean, bringing Jim Leonard in as a kind of a senior defensive assistant or whatever he's going to be, that was a great move. That tells me Brent Bielema, you said he gets it. He gets it. I mean, there's, this guy, a former NFL guy, smart guy, been a coordinator, filled in as a head coach. I mean, a lot of head coaches be intimidated to bring a guy like Jim Leonard in.
Yes.
But Brent Bielema says if this guy can help us win, and if he can bring a couple of thoughts every week to the defense or offense or whatever, hey, I want him. I want him to make our program better. So that's a little point right there that a lot of coaches wouldn't do, that I don't think we can minimize that. I mean, that tells you that Brent Bielema he wants best for this program.
One of the things that he said that's really interesting to your point is he said he's leaning on Jim Leonard as much for offense as he is for defense.
There you go.
That he thinks part of, if you're a defensive-minded coach, that then you can take a look at an offense and say, okay, well, here's where you could stress a defense. Here's what you could do a little bit differently.
Good point.
So Brett was telling us when we were there that that's a huge part of what he's going to lean on Jim Leonard for. Sure, he's going to lean on him for defense as well, but Brett's a defensive coach himself, right? And feels good about his system. Again, new defensive coordinator in Aaron Henry. I understand there's some transition there, but I found that to be really interesting. And look, scheduling isn't easy for them. They open with Toledo. It's a team that was picked to win the MAC by a lot of people, and then they go to Kansas, which I think is going to be a really tricky game as well.
Absolutely.
So they're going to have to be good right out of the gate. Breaking news here out of Columbus. Ohio State head coach Ryan Day announcing that Kyle McCord will be his starter against Indiana. He did say, however, that Devin Brown will play against the Hoosiers. So some breaking news to react to here. Coach, your take on how Ryan Day laid this out?
I think it was the right decision. Unless it was so far one way or another that Devin was out playing him, which obviously he's been honest up front all the way and said, no, it wasn't that way. So I think you got the most experienced guy, the guy that's been in the huddle. You got a great group of skill players from receivers all the way down, running backs. So I think it's the right decision. And you look at their schedule, he said Devin's going to play, and anything can happen. I'm not slighting any other teams, but you got Indiana, you got Youngstown State, and you got Western Kentucky. So you got 3 games before they play Notre Dame, where Devin Brown can get some, hopefully he can get some playing time, and get some experience and get some snaps, under his belt, as we say. So I think the schedule sets up pretty good for Devin to get some action. But more importantly, I promise you, when he walked into that receiver room with Marvin Harrison and company, those guys, hey, they're excited.
Yeah, I would think so. Marvin Harrison and Kyle McCord played in high school together, so you've got to think that Marvin Harrison feels good for him. But everyone's kind of just looking for, hey, what's the formula for us to win here? Where I find it interesting is that Ryan Day said he's the starting quarterback against Indiana. We haven't heard the whole news conference yet, so I don't know exactly what the verbiage was, but he's not necessarily saying he's our starting quarterback for the year. He's not saying he's not. He's just saying, hey, here's where we're going. Do you back yourself into a corner a little bit, though, when you say both quarterbacks will play? Or do you feel comfortable enough as a head coach to say, hey, there will be some situation
Absolutely.
where we'll work them in?
And you know what? It might not have to be a situation where they're ahead. I mean, it might be a situation where when we get into the red zone or we get on the goal line, or if we get the first time we get in a short yardage and 3, 4, 5 situation, that let's put Devin in, and we got a set of plays for him that he can execute well and help us win too and get experience.
And he did say in this news conference, and again, just kind of reading what's out there right now because we've been on the air, didn't have a chance to hear it, that he's confident that they have 2 quarterbacks who can play and can lead the team. And that's echoes what he has been saying here all along in camp, echoes what he said to us when we were there. So, I think they feel like it's good quarterback situation, but you got to choose someone, and at least for now, they have chosen Kyle McCord. We got a big action-packed day on Saturday. We got defending West champ Purdue, the first Big Ten team we'll see on the network. Starts with Big Ten tailgate, 10 a.m. Eastern time, live from West Lafayette, and then the football tripleheader with the Boilers in Fresno State, Maryland hosting Towson, Illinois battling Toledo in primetime. Then at 11 Eastern, the final drive, recapping the entire day around the conference. All Saturday, only here on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Let's dive into Purdue as the fifth of the 7 West teams we're going to preview here. Pretty interesting transition. You have Jeff Brom leaving for his alma mater of Louisville. Ryan Walters now a first-time head coach, one who had an incredible defensive run the last couple of years at Illinois, including having the number 1 scoring defense in the nation last year. But much as we were talking about Wisconsin hiring an air raid coordinator, he has done the same thing. He's got Graham Harrell, who of course was a very successful quarterback at Texas Tech. What do you think about this balance of a defensive-minded head coach, not unlike what we have at Wisconsin, and an air raid attack?
Yeah, I think that Ryan has to be careful. I mean, I really do, because he's inexperienced, and Graham Harrell has great reputation. Obviously, Hudson Card is a guy that can throw the ball around. I know you love him.
Yeah,
the transfer from Texas Tech. So he's got to be careful. And I told this story one time, but real quick, when I first got the Bears job, I was playing golf with Chuck Noll, the late Chuck Noll from the Steelers, and he said, "Dave, don't ever lose sight," he says, "why you got this job. Because of your defensive expertise. Keep your focus there till you get this program going." And I think that that's what Ryan Walters needs to do. He can't go in there and say, okay, that we're going to throw the ball around like we did, in the past, with Brom at Purdue. No. Get defense. Put your offense in, but it doesn't have to be air raid type of offense.
Right.
And I just hope he doesn't fall into that trap. And I know this guy can throw it, but he just got to be careful that he keeps his focus. Let's get the defense better, and the offense will catch up. We don't need to go in there and try to score, because the worst thing that will happen to his defense, you throw turnovers, you get sacks, and here we go. You got no chance. So that's my only concern here when we talk about air raid and the quarterback that can throw it. We're going to keep it wide open. Be careful, I would say. Be careful.
Pretty interesting take there. And again, his philosophy was, this is the kind of offense that I have a hard time dealing with, and that's what I want us to run. But I do think that this is going to be really interesting. I think Wisconsin's going to be interesting too. Kind of how do you marry these two together if you are a defensive-minded coach? Because I'm sure you take pride in scoring defense, and I just kind of, by the very nature of what they're doing, they're probably going to play in higher scoring games. That's just kind of the way these things work, right? So pretty interesting.
Well, you got your top running back coming back, right? Maccabee's back, so you got him coming back. So you got a guy that can somewhat run the ball, and the guys that they lost now, Charlie Jones, is an NFL player, and Aiden O'Connell is on an NFL roster right now. So you didn't lose just good college players. These guys are next level players. So I think he's got to look at that and just keep everything kind of one step at a time. Don't go too fast.
Let's dive into Nebraska, and we mentioned the Boilers coming off a good stretch. That is not the case with the Huskers. This is, to me, one of the most amazing stats in the Big Ten, maybe in all of college football. If someone would have told you 20 years ago that we were going to be here in 2023 and the longest streak in the Power Five of not making a bowl game would be Nebraska. 6 years in a row they haven't made a bowl. So I guess the truth of the matter is that the bar's pretty low for Matt Rule. The expectations in the long term are, of course, lofty. But in the immediate term, it's just, hey, can you get them back to being competitive? Can you get them back to being a postseason team? What do you think about kind of how you approach year one here for Matt Rule with the Huskers?
Coach, I sat in Lincoln back in the early 80s when I was at Oklahoma State. And I remember before the game, I was a defense coordinator, and somebody said, we're underdog by 32 points. And I said, there'll be nobody in the world that beats us by 32 points. We were down 32 at halftime. So I know the other side, and I know what those Nebraska fans are thinking, okay?
Right.
And what their expectations are down the road. But right now, no. And let me just say this, because their linebackers at Luke Reamer, good linebacker. I was watching him. He was doing an interview 2 days ago, and they asked him, they says, is this a total redo, how's Coach Rule treating you guys? And he says, let me tell you something right now. We got a lot of veterans, and guys aren't bailing. Yeah. And Coach Rule told us, hey, buy in. This is going to be a little bit different, but I want to win now. And we're going to do the things and coach you to win now so you guys have a great – it was a great, I thought, press conference by a veteran player. And when you look at their roster defensively, well, they got 8 starters back from last year. So they've got the players to put it together. He's hired a good staff on offense and defense. The whole key, the quarterback, Jeff Sims, he transfers in from Georgia Tech. I remember him when he was in the ACC. He was a little bit injury prone because he's probably more of a runner than a passer. Quarterbacks don't want to admit it, but that's probably his forte. So they're going to be kind of a running football team, in my opinion, starting off, and play really good defense. And it's all a matter of the quarterback, how he plays. If they can get a great year out of Jeff Sims, the transfer kid, then I think that they got a chance to surprise a lot of people, because they're going to play good defense. I promise you that. Tony White's a really good defense coordinator. They're putting in an unusual package, this 3-3-5, and the teams have a problem getting ready for on a short week. So they're going to be much improved. And what he's doing, and I talked to a couple guys, he's trying to create that culture. When I talk about Minnesota, I talk about P.J. Fleck, culture that he's created, which gives him a chance to win every week. That's as important right now to Matt Rule as anything, but he's not cleaning. This is not a Colorado situation. He's trying to love these veteran guys up and say, come on, now let's go. Let's win as many as we can this year. We'll
be able to compare those two approaches in week 2.
We will.
When Nebraska takes on Colorado.
Exactly.
And Deion Sanders should be pretty interesting. But again, obviously, week 1, the game against the Gophers. We're going to talk about that, as we mentioned, a little bit later in the show. We say 4 new coaches, but I think the Northwestern situation is unique with David Braun, totally unexpected that he would be the head coach. Pat Fitzgerald let go in the wake of the allegations surrounding hazing within the program. And you talk about creating a new culture, and that's kind of one of the first things that you do as a head coach. But David Braun is in this interim situation, right? And then, of course, part of the issue with the hazing, inherent in that, is culture issues within the program to begin with. So how does he kind of walk this tightrope of wanting to be respectful of the guys and get them to rally behind him, not necessarily having this feeling of being there for the long term? It feels to me like this is a really, really challenging situation.
Yeah, and he loses Hall, who was their best running back. He loses Washington, right, who was a top receiver, one of their top receivers. So, he's got some personnel issues too. Undecided at the quarterback, right? Who's going to be the starter? They're rotating 2 or 3 guys. Maybe end up being Bryant, the transfer guy, but we'll see. Do the things that you can control to give you a chance to win the game. That's what I would tell the players if I was at Northwestern. In other words, hey, we are going to be in better shape than them. Okay, guys, we are not going to commit dumb penalties. We're going to be smarter. We're not going to give them anything. We're going to be sound in the kicking game. So you could pull 3 or 4 things out because they're going to be a young football team. I was looking at their defense the other day. It's going to be a lot of freshmen and sophomore. A lot of young kids are going to be playing, on Northwestern's football team this year. For the most part, they graduate 4 out of 5 of the offensive linemen. And so there's going to be some young new starters in there. And let's do the things, guys, that when we put the film on, if we're good enough, we'll win the game. But if we're not good enough, we'll deal with that. But let's not beat ourselves. Let's clean things up and not make those mistakes that give us no chance.
A ton of turnovers last year, and that was a huge issue for them. They had the most turnovers in all of the Power Five. You mentioned the kicking game. They've been really poor in the kicking game in recent years. So I think where it's really challenging is it's not like this was going to be a good team on paper to begin with, right? They're 4-20 last 2 years combined, and then you throw in all this other stuff. Challenging situation.
And five new coaches. I mean, Fitz brought in, David Brom as a coordinator, but on that staff of 10, 5 of them are new guys. So keeping the coaches together too, that's going to be as important as keeping the team together.
Yeah, and you have to think that if it goes poorly early, it's going to be tough to hold that group together. So these first couple games against teams that they would match up reasonably well against, certainly really important for Northwestern. Today's big stat takes us to Piscataway, where Rutgers striker Allison Lowry posted a hat trick in yesterday's 7-0 win over FDU. First hat trick by a Scarlet Knight since 2019. She now has 5 goals through the team's first 4 games of the season. Rutgers off to a 2-1-1 start. To women's volleyball, the Indiana Hoosiers are 3-0, sweeping the competition in their first 3 matches. The Hot Start will be tested this weekend at the Long Beach Invitational, where they will face Long Beach State, along with future Big Ten foes UCLA and Washington. Their coach, Steve Aird, is today's big interview. He joins us now from Bloomington. And Coach, 3-0, you have been completely dominant, as we outlined there. I know the level of competition is going to step up here this weekend, but how has the way that your team has played to this point compared with your expectations?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, Dave. I think we've got a group that worked hard all summer. Veteran kids, been in the gym, coming early, staying late, and working hard. So I feel like they were excited to get the year going. And you're right, this will take a jump in competition this week, and we're excited to test ourselves and excited for the opportunity.
You returned virtually all of your key contributors from last year. How difficult is that to do in this day and age in college athletics where there is so much moving around?
Well, I think part of it comes back to the young athletes and the culture. I think a lot of it is the support that Indiana is giving to volleyball now. I think, as I've said before, Scott Dolson and Maddie White, Jeremy Gray really care about where this program is headed, and the community's behind it. So we're in a good place right now. Recruiting has gone well. The development has gone well. And full credit to the kids. I think they're excited. They play hard. They work hard. They're good human beings. So it's fun to come to work every day for sure.
You mentioned the commitment. You guys have a beautiful new facility. How has that changed the trajectory of the program?
Yeah, when I got to become the head coach at Indiana, they played at a facility a few miles off of campus, and the concept was to park a facility right beside Assembly Hall. It's a basketball school, and we're proud of that. But 24 sports, one team, and they're trying to do everything they can to build this Olympic Village style campus. Jay Wilkinson and his family have been so great to us and donated and support the program at a high level. And we just feel really fortunate to have a beautiful facility that's right in the heart of our athletic campus, right beside basketball's historic arena. And we feel like that's helped a great deal in recruiting and development and trajectory of the program.
Where have you seen the most growth in your returning players so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's experience. They talk in college hoops and football all the time about getting old and staying old. I think for us, it's about we've recruited well, but they were young, and it took them a few years to really get their feet underneath them. And we've added some really good pieces and had some kids develop at a really high level. So when you put that all together, it gives us a chance to have success. It's certainly, I have too much respect for the conference and the teams we play this week to get ahead of ourselves, but we'll be competitive. And I think we do a few things that are really high level, and we work really hard. We've got a great staff, so very fortunate to be in the situation that we're in.
I saw that one of your freshmen is Luca Fickle, who is Luke Fickle's daughter, and he was in attendance this weekend. Have you talked to her at all about divided loyalties? I mean, I know there must be some Wisconsin football loyalty in the family, but is this an issue that you've raised with her at all?
No, I think Luca, she's a really bright kid. This is a phenomenal family, and Luke is one of the great guys in college athletics. I'm lucky to call him a friend. We spend time, when we see each other, talking about sport, kind of on the macro. And he's a great husband. He's a great father. He's someone I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And his daughter's good. I mean, real good. And has a chance to be really solid for a long time. And we're lucky that she chose Indiana. So nothing but glowing reviews for that family. And I think Wisconsin's very lucky to have him.
This is the 6th year for you at the helm of Indiana Volleyball. This program was 1-19 the year before you took it over. So it really has been kind of a complete rebuild. You beat 2 ranked teams last year. You won the most road games in conference as a Big Ten member in more than a decade. Where do you feel like you have made the most progress with this program?
I think a bit of perception. Certainly nationally, I think people know that we can play, and we've been able to win some big matches and certainly climb in the conference. But then recruiting as well. I'm really proud of my staff and proud of the team for building a culture that elite players want to be part of. And rebuilding's hard. It was my 3rd rebuild that I've been part of as a staff. And you say all the time that you'd like to microwave it, but it's baking, and you've got to find really good people who do things the right way. And they're committed to being good human beings. And we talk about that a lot in this building. Is we want kids who aren't entitled. We want kids who want to give more than they get and represent the school the right way. And I'm really fortunate right now to have a group that is doing just that.
I want to get into your background a little bit. You're originally from Canada, I believe. Is that a Canadian flag on your shirt there?
Yeah. I've got a lot of Drake clothing. Big Drake fan, and I'm a little stressed out because he hasn't dropped the album yet, but I was hoping he'd do it before we got to LA and I could have something to listen to. But Canadian, very proud to be Canadian. I've recruited Canada. I think the Big Ten Network now plays at a lot of places back home and bars and restaurants and stuff that I get texts from people who love watching the content. So I'm proud of what volleyball has become in this conference, and certainly proud that back home in Canada people get to watch it, and hopefully they're proud of what we're doing at Indiana.
You were a captain on some really good Penn State teams. What did you consider to be kind of your career highlight?
Well, I was really fortunate to be at Penn State across the board. I mean, to play for the men was a great experience. I was a better captain than I was a player. I think I cared about the team and certainly had a decent career, but working with Russ Rose for as long as I worked with Russ Rose was really the deal. And he's like a second dad to me. We miss him in the conference, and I couldn't put a price tag on all the experience I gathered being part of that coaching staff.
He obviously was so phenomenal, but are there a couple of huge lessons that you learned from Russ Rose that you carry forward, like maybe a couple mantras or just ways of doing things?
Well, the 2 things that stand out, number one, he worked harder than anyone I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he was in the office late, early, was always prepared. We always felt really confident with him at the helm because we felt like we were 3 or 4 points better than people just because of his preparation. And then one of my favorite sayings that he has is that I like to recruit kids with character, but I also like characters. So for me, I want to have a good time every day. I like kids who are really good players, but I like kids who want to have a good time, come into the office with a coffee, talk about music, talk about business, things that I enjoy.
Talk about Drake, for instance.
Plenty of Drake. There's a lot of Drake warming up in the office, that's for sure.
I do want to go forward again with your team this year. We started talking about them a little bit. Let's talk about this challenge ahead here. I mentioned you go to Long Beach this weekend. You've got the matchup with Long Beach State and then UCLA and Washington. So the level of difficulty ramps up. What do you hope to learn about your team?
Well, just if we can play well for extended periods of time. I think we do some things at a really high level. It's just the consistency of it. And these teams, I mean, all 3 of them have won national championships. I mean, I have a ton of respect for all of the programs. We're not in that conversation. We're not a historically great program. We've had good players and good coaches, but we're trying to get to the point where we're a little bit more relevant and a little bit better than we've been in the past. And one of the ways to do that is to play the best. So, I grew up in the Russ Rose versus Brian Gemellaro battles, and UCLA has won a title, and Washington obviously has been incredibly good, especially during the Jimmy Mack days. So some incredibly legendary coaches and programs, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to compete against them.
It is interesting that you're facing both UCLA and Washington, and of course these are programs that will be joining the Big Ten next year. Certainly you didn't know that Washington was going to be joining the Big Ten when you set out to play in this Long Beach Invitational. But how do you see the addition of those two programs and two others as well kind of changing the face of Big Ten volleyball?
Well, certainly from a geographic standpoint, it does. I think it's going to give fans all over the place opportunities to see matchups that they might only see in the preseason traditionally. For the Big Ten Conference, as a coach, you're used to playing the best every night, and there's just no bad team in the conference, so there's no nights off. For the players we recruit, it's a really cool opportunity to make a couple trips to the West Coast. And even in this trip, we're taking a couple kids back home. We've got some California kids on the roster and plan on recruiting California kids. And so I think it's great for the sport and great for the conference. And, I know there's a lot of talk about how scheduling is going to work out and how travel is going to work out. But from a volleyball perspective, I think it does nothing but help us.
The head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers, Steve Aird, best of luck on this trip out west. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time here today.
Thank you, Dave. All the best.
Week 1 in the Big Ten kicks off Thursday night, Nebraska and Minnesota on Fox. One of 3 conference games on the Week 1 schedule. Ohio State and Indiana Saturday, Northwestern Rutgers Sunday. All 5 of the ranked Big Ten teams play on Saturday. 11 games over the course of 4 days. Got a few minutes left just to dive into a few of these games. Let's start with the pre-Saturday games, Minnesota and Nebraska. Just a quick thought on that matchup.
Well, I want to see, obviously, who's going to be Minnesota's running backs, because that's kind of the backbone of their offense. Who can run the ball? With Mo being gone, Potts being gone, that's kind of up for grabs. And then the quarterback, Athan, the quarterback from Minnesota, with this 3-3-5 defense, will he be able to run the offense and get out of bad plays and put them in good plays? So that would be the two things. And then on the other side, Matt Roll, how's his team handle the ups and downs? How does he handle the ups and downs when he's trying to build culture at Nebraska? This will be a big test.
Pretty interesting to think that Minnesota's won the last 4 games in this series when you think about how much Nebraska had dominated it for years. So that is Thursday night. What about Friday's game? Michigan State hoping to start a bounce-back season. They got Jim McElwain in Central Michigan.
Yeah.
What are you watching there?
Who's a good coach, and they got a little bit of quarterback, trying to figure out who's going to be their guy, too. The biggest thing, we need to decide. We got a little quarterback controversy going. Not controversy, but we got to get Michigan State's got to come out and play good quarterback play, whoever it is. They do have a good running back, so they can lean on Berger, right? I mean, he's back. We know he's a legitimate player, and the defense has to get better. Last year that is not a Michigan State defense that we're used to seeing. So I think they just got to come out and play good and don't take it down to the last 2 minutes of the game. That would be the worst thing that could happen in this game, where now all of a sudden you're down there in the last 2 minutes and Central Michigan saying, oh boy, we got a chance to win this thing. No. Get after them early. Come out of the locker room ready to play.
And maybe the defense could build some confidence after how bad it was last year. Central Michigan coming off its worst season under McElwain. They're breaking in a new quarterback. They lost a record-setting running back as well. So perhaps this is a game where Michigan State can get off on a positive note. Penn State, the only Big Ten team that opens its season with a non-conference Power 5 battle. James Franklin sending out this message, rallying the fan base, saying they are fired up to be 1-0 on Saturday. Let's dive a little bit into this one. Again, we don't have a ton of time here, but you know both of these programs really well from your time at Pitt. Give us a sense for this one.
Well, the head coach at West Virginia, Neil Brown, obviously is under a lot of pressure. We do know that. The last 2 years, they've had the least takeaways of any team in the Big 12. So, that's not a good matchup when you look at Penn State, regardless how the quarterback comes out. I got Penn State as my top defensive line in the conference. Mandy Diaz, another year on that defense. I look for domination and a lot of turnovers by Penn State's defense this game.
Cool to see this rivalry renewed. They played
Yeah.
every year from 47 to 92. Real quick, Indiana and Ohio State, we found out the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes and Cal McCord. What else stands out here?
Well, that's a good thing, I believe. Now there's some stability within the offense of who's going to be throwing the ball, who's going to be calling the plays. When I look at Indiana, Tom Allen, God, I mean, it's just tough. 23 transfer portals, 17 of them on defense. They lose 10 of 11 starters on defense last year. This is a tough opener for him.
He likes a lot of that talent based on when we were at camp, but you might like a little bit easier opening game to kind of figure out where everyone fits together. Great stuff as always. Next Tuesday, we're talking about results. We'll see you tomorrow. Anthony Herron's with me.